Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Allen with Canna Pop-Up. You know, in both difficult and prosperous times, a solid financial plan is really key. So today, Norman Chevlin, who is a certified financial planner, is going to share some of his 28 years of experience with us. Norman, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and to be able to hopefully share some valuable knowledge with our audience.
Before we get, into finding out more, why don't we start with a little bit about your background?
Okay, well, I think anybody that's going to work with a financial planner is going to want to make sure that they're knowledgeable. So let's just begin with the fact that I have a bachelor's degree. I also have a master's degree. And I did that initially because in my earlier years was going to go into the computer programming field. Did that for a number of years and realized it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. I liked the financial markets and I liked working with people and not just sitting behind a desk. So I decided to go and get the various licenses that I needed to begin becoming a financial planner and helping people with their insurance and financial planning and investment needs. So that's what I've been doing for the past 28 years, basically sitting down and making sure that I'm able to connect with my clients, explore what their current situation is, design plans, and collaborate with them to get them where they want to be. And I'll obviously implement whatever recommendations they agree with that we want to move forward with.
Well, it's interesting because we got to meet a number of months ago at an industry-related event, and we'll touch on that in just a second. And really, one of the first things that both Holly and I noticed about you was how personable you were, and can easily see what that experience would be like working with you professionally. But so you just shared with us your professional background and what you've been doing over these years. But now you're making a shift in your business, and cannabis is upon us, right? Especially here in New Jersey. So what inspired you to make that shift and to start, servicing, that segment of people who need your services?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, am I going to be doing planning in the cannabis space, I would have said you were probably kind of crazy. But as it be told, I guess I'm the crazy one. As we all know, we can see the growth of cannabis and hemp, in our country, obviously it's just being legalized in Canada for both recreational and medicinal uses and throughout the world. So initially how this happened was about 2 years ago. I happened to be in the city with a friend and we had saw an advertisement for, I think it was called the CWEVO Expo, which is a giant cannabis-related expo that has vendors from all over the country. And if you know the Javits Center, there's 3 or 4 other conventions going on at any given time. So we decided to go and walk in there and walk through there and see what this whole thing was about. And so we did that. We went in, we checked out all the vendors. At that time, given it was 2 years ago, most of the companies were from the West Coast because that's where this whole revolution or evolution of cannabis, hemp, CBD, recreational versus medicinal was all happening out in California, Oregon, Arizona. And so again, most of the vendors were there, and I was walking around and I saw all these successful business owners, but yet I didn't see any accounting firms or financial planning firms there. And so I thought to myself, here's a niche that I think is something that I would feel really comfortable being able to help people to work in. So I immediately, after spending a couple of days there, it's a 4-day event, I had spoken to one of the vendor managers that signs people up. And I said, you know what, sign me up for next year. I want to be part of this. So in the interim, given that whole year, I had did a lot of planning. I came up with my logo, my trademark, Plant Your Financial Seed. And that was pretty much how I got started in wanting to be an integral part of this fast growing industry.
But and help me understand this, right? Because I don't know if there's any other industry as unique as this, in that, we're talking about legalization for individual states, but at the federal level, we're talking about a Schedule I drug that is illegal, prosecutable, and the financial institutions won't touch it, right? So we, out west, right? You hear these stories of warehouses being guarded 24 hours a day because they're full of cash. So
Yeah.
how does, you know, we're talking about what's predicted to be a $35 billion, and that's with a B, right? $35 billion a year industry by 2022. How are we going to manage that if it still remains a Schedule 1 drug at the federal level?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you know, there's two ways to look at this. As you mentioned, there have been quite a number of states. I think currently there's about 31 states that have approved the medicinal use of cannabis in the state. There's also, in addition to that, I think it currently count 9 states that allow for both medicinal and recreational use of cannabis. Obviously, there has been you know, major issues with the ability of these entrepreneurs to be able to put the monies away that their businesses are making, pay their employees, cover their benefits, so on and so forth. Now, you know, since, you know, a lot has changed even over the past year, where people don't understand, banks are actually allowed to work with these entrepreneurs. It's just that it's called the FinCEN requirements and BSA requirements are so restrictive and prohibitive that banks are, you know, don't want to incur the expense. And even though, you know, they are allowed to do it, there is still the fear of federal reprisal. So what we have found is a lot of the states now, you're right, having to, up until very recently, have armored cars pull up to their place of business, whether it's a dispensary or a cultivation business, and load it up with money and take it to some kind of a safe and pay as a safe or a warehouse or something that's heavily guarded 24 hours a day. We are now seeing a lot of state-chartered banks that have decided to get into it that don't have the same restrictions as most of your larger federally chartered banking institutions, as well as your financial institutions, whether it's a Morgan Stanley, a JP Morgan, a State Street. But a lot of these more community banks are willing to do that and have become tools so that payroll companies can work through and have the business work on a more legitimate basis by issuing checks, having bank and business checking accounts, and not having to worry about armored cars and safes and guarded warehouses, so to speak.
Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting how within the cannabis industry, there are concerns that don't necessarily exist within other industries. And I know one of the subjects that comes up both for employees of cannabis related businesses or just the everyday person is that comes the question of personal insurance, right? And let's talk about life insurance. You know,
Yeah.
and I've had this, you know, personally with friends who have had issues obtaining life insurance or perceived difficulties because they consume cannabis, whether it be medically or recreationally.
Yeah.
Is all hope lost for those people in terms of being able to get life insurance?
No, actually, it's a pretty big misconception, and I'll look at it from 2 points of view. So you have the individual who, you know, works in any type of, you know, management job, a warehouse, you know, on Wall Street, whatever the case may be, a doctor, a nurse, and they may partake in recreational use of marijuana. Now, it may not be federally legal, but their state may allow for it, or it may not. But the fact of the matter is, I've had a large number of people throughout the years come to me and say, hey, listen, I need life insurance. I just got married. I have a family. I have kids. Is there anything I can do? Oh, and by the way, you know, I just want to let you know that I do, you know, indulge in occasionally smoking marijuana. And what has happened, believe it or not, is that the actuaries of a lot of these larger insurance companies, and most insurance companies, and their actuaries have sat down and have kind of crunched the numbers and have seen that they're more willing to actually offer life insurance to people that smoke marijuana recreationally, as long as you're honest about it on the application. They don't want to find out on their own. They want you to be upfront and tell them, say, listen, I am an occasional marijuana smoker, just like you would if you're an occasional cigar smoker. But if with marijuana, because, you know, the actuarial feeling is that it's not as dangerous as alcohol or even nicotine, is that I'm able to get people that smoke strictly marijuana on a very moderate basis. And again, we're talking about in marijuana terms, maybe 4 to 5 joints, I think they call them, a week, or marijuana cigarettes a week. And they can actually get preferred non-smoker rates, which would be a lot less than smokers, whose rates are going to be double just because they smoke cigarettes. And there's a lot more research in terms of the causes of different types of cancers and so on and so forth resulting from cigarette smoke. So the answer is yes. Don't be afraid to come to me just because you are a occasional recreational smoker, because there's plenty of companies out there that will offer you insurance. Now, for the entrepreneur business owner, and we'll get more in depth in this a little bit later with key man and buy-sell agreements, but there are still some issues for the individual entrepreneur that owns a dispensary or has employees at work that he wants to provide life insurance for, or disability insurance. There are strategies that we can use. Now, if this entrepreneur happens to have a business other than the cannabis business, like maybe he's a landlord that's renting the space where the dispensary happens to be in, or has some other type of full-time job and is just doing this from a business relationship point of view with some partners, he still can very well get individual disability insurance and life insurance. The main sticking point is right now they're just concerned if 100% of your income is coming strictly from a cannabis-related business, that's the only sticking point. But by no means is that going to prevent you if you are able to prove that you have income from other sources, or if you're the occasional recreational user. Please call me, because don't be afraid that there's plenty of outlets out there for you to get the proper amount of coverage you need.
Well, I'm sure that's going to be comforting for many people who see this. But the key thing, and I think you'll agree, and you said this, you just need to be honest up front, right? Because if you say no, and then they find that becomes an issue, doesn't it?
It does, because again, they kind of feel like you're hiding something. And let me tell you one thing, insurance companies, as you all know, are not in business to lose money. They make money because they've crunched the numbers, they have actuaries, and they know that marijuana is not the cause of death. I don't think there's been any recorded instances of somebody dying from an overdose of marijuana, versus all the ailments and conditions that we know can result from people who drink too much, as far as liver damage and other types of things, or smokers. So right now that is the case. And again, I would urge those that have up until this point hesitated to please call me, because I will have no problem. Now, this is assuming no other significant health issues, okay? Because that's going to come into play too. But if you're a healthy individual and all you do is occasionally indulge in recreational smoking and marijuana, give me a call and I will be able to help you.
Norman, we keep getting questions on the topic of cannabis and employee protections in the workplace. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, right now, there are no statutory laws protecting employees that are using medicinal prescribed marijuana for different ailments or conditions that they have. And so if they get tested in the workplace, they are and can very easily get fired. I think that, these people, as long as they're using this medication, off-site before they come to work or after work, should be protected, because like any other prescription that you're taking, as long as it's not impairing your ability to do your work or your job, I don't think it's something that anyone should get fired for. I do hope in the upcoming legislation that this bill, S2703, will be included, as well as including expungements and decriminalization for very minor infractions. So hopefully, I don't know when it's going to come to pass. It was supposed to be October 29th, now November 1st, and now that they say chances are it won't happen until probably the beginning of next year. So we'll have to see where the New Jersey legislature and Senate goes with this, but those are my feelings when it comes to that.
So, Norman, a day really doesn't go by where we don't read about marijuana in the news, whether it be about legalization or more frequently now than ever before about investing in cannabis, because growth they're predicting is exponential, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about what it's like in your experience, investing in the cannabis space?
Right. So, I mean, I guess there's two types of investing, right? There are those that really want to go in and, wholeheartedly in terms of maybe getting a license to open up their own dispensary, or maybe open up a cultivation facility. And so, that's one way to go, albeit it's very difficult to get these licenses. You have to have a great deal of money up front, and don't expect to make any money probably for 3 or 4 years down the road because of all the upfront overhead that's involved, whether it's opening up a dispensary, all the regulations, the insurances, the guards that you need, because it's a cash business still. So those who buy and sell in a dispensary are doing so with cash. They can't use credit cards or debit cards at this point. So there's a lot of overhead involved with that. For those that are going to try and grow their own or cultivate their own, there's tons of overhead required in having, multiple greenhouses, so to speak, with the proper lighting, the proper structure, the proper soils, the fertilization, everything that's involved. And people just don't realize. I've gone to a great number of these gatherings, informational gatherings, and I talk to people and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm looking to get a license. I'm going to open up a dispensary." Well, it's not that easy. So I think that people have to do their due diligence and be very well aware of what's expected legally, because there's a lot of legal expenses, as well as all the upfront costs in doing that portion of investing. Now, for the individual that's looking to invest in terms of stocks, equities, that type of investing, again, that's also been somewhat limited to basically companies in Canada, because United States still has not legalized cannabis use. None of the major exchanges here, although that's changed just recently in the last couple of weeks or so, have not had any stocks, Canadian stocks or any other stocks on any of the U.S. exchanges. And so anybody who wanted to invest had to invest on or in stocks that were Canada-based or Canadian-based on one of the exchanges, on Toronto Exchange, if they have access to that. More recently, we are finding that there have been some companies, some pharmaceutical companies or drugs that have been approved and have been allowed to be on the New York Stock Exchange. So you are now able to invest that way. And there's also a few what we call ETFs that are basically a group of companies that are all in one type of, similar to a mutual fund type of thing, that people are investing in. I would just say that, from what I've heard, a lot of word of mouth, you got to get this cannabis stock, you got to get this cannabis stock, it's going up by 20%, 50%. Be very, very careful, okay? What I've seen is already, and we've all seen, it's been a great deal of consolidation in the industry. There's going to be companies that are going to make it. There's going to be companies that are going to fail. There's a lot of companies now that are succeeding a lot because of the collaboration of a lot of beverage companies, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, from the United States, that are talking and merging with these companies because they see a future in a combination of what they're offering and the cannabis together.
And I think we're going to see a lot more movement over a relatively very short period of time. Certainly, right, this will change drastically once this is legal at the federal level.
Yeah, again, depending on where it goes federally, I'm kind of the belief that right now the federal government's going to take somewhat of a wait and see approach, see how things work out in Canada, since it's now been legalized both recreationally and medicinally, and also take a look at the states and see if everything that it was cut out to be actually come to fruition. So I'm also not sure if we're ever going to see recreational use on a national basis being approved. I think that medicinally, without doubt, it's been proven both here in the country and around the world of all the great medicinal benefits of the CBD oils that are extracted from the hemp plants and even from the marijuana plants themselves, the leaves themselves. And that's where the sticking point comes into play, because as we know, CBD in its purest form is legal in all 50 states right now. The issue is the combination of extracting CBD that may contain a certain concentration of THC, which is the portion that will get a person, quote unquote, high. And so that's where the sticking point is right now. So we'll have to just wait and see, where it goes and, take it from there.
So as we wrap up, is there any advice that you can give on how businesses can make sure that they have, that insurance plan in place to protect their business?
Yeah, and one thing I just want to jump back to, we talked about investment. I mean, this is a rule of thumb I talk to with any of my clients, that if you're going to invest in the cannabis space, by all means, do your due diligence. And if it makes sense, do it. Just make sure it doesn't exceed more than 10% of your entire portfolio. Because, 10%, if you make money, that's great. But if you lose, at least you're only affecting, 10% of your portfolio. So make that, a point that you really pay a lot of attention to. As far as how to protect the business owner or the entrepreneur, yes, I think that, what I found, and most of the business, unfortunately, I'm somewhat limited to only limiting my expertise to the insurance space because of the other regulations that are currently in place by the federal government. But we are able to offer things like key man policy. So a key man policy or key man insurance is basically insurance that you would want to purchase on an executive or the ultimate owner of, let's say, a dispensary or a cultivation unit, where if that person or owner were to, God forbid, pass away prematurely or become disabled, this key man policy would produce the tax-free proceeds from the life insurance, which would allow the business to keep on running, at least until they can find a replacement for that, for the owner or someone that has comparable goodwill, so that business will be able to continue to run smoothly and continue the operations, and allow all the employees that are dependent on this business for their livelihood to continue to work. I've also seen a lot of situations where, obviously, because of the upfront expense of being involved in a dispensary, in a lot of cases, you'll need anywhere from $2 to $5 million, which not a lot of people have on hand individually. However, if you can get a group of people together and form a partnership, there's a business relationship called a buy-sell agreement. And what that would do is make sure that all of the partners that are involved understand that if one of the partners, God forbid, dies prematurely, becomes disabled, or just decides they don't want to be part of the business anymore, that there's insurance in place to cover that. And normally what we're going to use, again, goes back to life insurance, so that if one of the business owners passes away, you're not going to want to necessarily be partners with their spouse and their children. So this would allow that partner's family to get his fair share of equity in the terms of tax-free monies that they can now walk away with and continue on with their lives. And the remaining business owners or partners can continue with the business and either take on another partner if they need to or not. But at least they have that flexibility and choice. And the same thing goes for disability. If one of the owners were to, God forbid, have a serious disability and they can no longer contribute to the business, having to keep them in the payroll and be a partner over a long period of time might not be the best situation. So by able to give that business owner a large buyout chunk of money so that they can feel good about walking away with their blood, sweat, and tears that they poured into the business, and still allow the remaining partners to move on, is a great source. And I want to just stress that a lot of people will have the document, buy-sell legal document that they got from their lawyer, but the document isn't worth anything if you don't have the funds to fund the agreement. So life insurance and disability insurance are going to play a very, very important role, in addition to the legal document that you might have your lawyers draw up for you.
Well, Norman, you've shared really amazing information. And these last two pieces that you shared, I had no idea that this type of insurance even existed. And I'm sure anyone who's watching this is going to feel the same way. So that was really key, for me, key man. So thanks for sharing that. Obviously, you're on a mission to assist and educate people, which is so important. Especially business owners involved in the cannabis or hemp space, and more importantly, their families, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. It's the people who we care for that this insurance ultimately, will help. And, yeah, go ahead. You want to?
Well, if I can add one more thing, I want to just take it a step back, because it's really key person insurance. As we know, we have a lot of very successful female entrepreneurs in the business too. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't hold women on an equal plane with men, and maybe even above in some situations. So I apologize if I was misleading in that. But we are absolutely talking about both successful men and women that are entrepreneurs in this cannabis space.
Well, thank you for that clarification, and that is so very true that gender really becomes secondary in this equation, certainly. So, before we wrap up, I want to let everyone know that your website, it's on the screen, plantyourfinancialseed.com. And they can find out a wealth of information there, and I encourage everyone to visit your website. But how, if people want to get right in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out and let people know, where you're located?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, I put a lot of time and effort and money, of course, into my website, and I think people that go on there will find it to be very useful for all parts of their life. Whether it's, you can calculate your college education needs for your kids, you can look up any kind of insurances, you can find out tons of information about things that you're going to need in your daily, your daily living. In terms of reaching out to me, all my information is on the website, so you can obviously email me with any questions at plantyourfinancialseed@gmail.com. The website is plantyourfinancialseed.com. My phone number is 1-833-CANNABIS, and that's KANABIS. So any of those ways are fine. I'd be happy to sit down, no obligation, have a cup of coffee. Let's get to know each other. Let's see what your goals and objectives are and how I can help you, and hopefully build a long-lasting relationship with you.
Well, anyone who gets to meet you certainly will find it very easy to form that relationship and feel very comfortable. So thank you so much for sharing all of this incredibly valuable information. And I would encourage anyone who's looking for any services related to insurance, financial planning, whether it be in the cannabis space or not, I don't think it's you could make a bad choice by meeting with you and listening to what you have to share. So Norman, thank you so much for being with us today. Visit Norman's website at plantyourfinancialseed.com. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found this information valuable. I know I did. My name is Robert Allen from Canna Pop-Up. We'll see you next time.